Alright, we are back with another video. Sorry it took a long time. Uh, yeah. So my return video is here. Took October off. Just needed a month to recover, I guess, from burnout. But today's video is, judging by the title, you already know what it is. What would happen if Jonathan killed Dio in the mansion? Or in their mansion fight? So, yeah. Without wasting any time, let's actually get into this hypothetical what if, shall we? And let's see how Phantom Blood, and not just Phantom Blood, but battle tendency through Stone Ocean is going to change afterwards. But before I get into the storyline changes, I want to thank the person who requested this what if Venom 9000. So, Venom 9000, hope you enjoy this video. Hope I do your request justice. And I hope you're able to get some kind of enjoyment out of this video. And anyway, let's actually just get into the what if and see what would change. So in this timeline, you gotta ask the question, which mansion fight? Because Jonathan and Dio had like 3 mansion fights in the franchise. It's the mansion fight when they were kids, then there was the mansion fight when they were adults, and then or when Dio first turned into a vampire, and then the mansion fight during their first final fight when Dio lost his body at the end. So one is the most unlikely to happen because both were not fighting with the intent to kill. Well, Dio was at the end, but even then, I don't really think Jonathan would ever kill Dio in this timeline. So yeah, it's not obviously the first case scenario. So obviously 2 and 3 make the most logical sense, and I'm gonna stick with 2 as I think that one would affect the plot more. I will do scenario 3 if you're interested, but there's already been a YouTuber who done that one, and while I do want to do my own take on Dio dying in the castle fight, I'm just going to say in this version he dies to the fire in the mansion fight, just for the sake of this plot, because that one seems like a much more interesting topic in my honest opinion. But anyway, when it comes down to how the effects of Phantom Blood change after this version of the timeline, well, a bit of a fun fact beforehand is that originally, from what I remember, Rocky actually planned that as a potential ending for JoJo Part 1, Dio dying in that fight in the Joestar mansion to the fire. Kind of as a way of, if the series fails or if he gives up on it, he could just end it there. That's what I remember hearing in a video, but I don't know. But if we're talking about the rest of Phantom Blood, I don't think much would honestly change when you really think about it. I mean, obviously stuff would change. I mean, like, when I mean stuff wouldn't change much, I would mean they would still meet Will, like Jonathan, Arena, and Speedwagon. They still meet William Zappelli as they originally do. 1 second. I just need a little bit of water break. My throat's killing me. They still meet Will like they originally do, and that whole thing meeting Will still happens like in the canon. And this leads to Will turning Jonathan Hormone, but in this case, Will would assume Dio is alive, but however, maybe some sort of evidence comes in to reveal that Dio did die in this timeline. On a side note, the stone mask that Dio had is going to probably get destroyed in the flames, and assuming Jonathan even still owns the mask, Will would probably just destroy it or keep it for himself, I don't know. So, at that point, Phantom Blood goes more or less the same. Nothing much would really change when it comes to hormone training, but however, there would be no more Dio, so no more villains, and Jonathan, Will, Speedwagon, and all those people like Dyer, Straitso, and Tom Petty would just train together. There's nothing much I can really think of as a whole. If anything, Phantom Blood just ends here. There's really nothing else to go on about. There'd be no Poco and his sister in this timeline, but I don't think that would really change anything, so they're probably just doing what they were doing before they met Jonathan. When it comes down to it, overall, Phantom Blood is just skipped after this. So that's basically all of Phantom Blood. Alright, so going into battle tendency, this would also be where more changes happen. Jonathan, Will, and Dyer are all still alive, and this is definitely going to affect the story more. For starters, in this alternative universe, Jonathan's going to be able to be there to raise his son, George II. Obviously. Will's obviously there to raise Mario Zeppeli as well, so that's another thing. One change for certain is that George II would not die. the reason he did die in the canon was because one of Dio's vampires attacked and killed him. But in this hypothetical timeline, without Dio being here because he was killed off like 20, 30 years ago, 20, 30 years before all this happened, George II would never encounter the vampire, and George II would still be alive. So the zombie commander that canonically killed him would be out of the equation, and George II would still be alive. Taking a lot of water breaks here today. Jeez. Um, this obviously could mean to Lisa not leaving the Joestar family, but I think she'll leave just to investigate the Stone Mask on her own, kind of like how Jotaro did with the stand arrows. I think Lisa would just do the same thing, so Joseph can still be without a mother, but he would have his father and his grandfather around, so there's that. Overall, with more characters being around, this would definitely affect battle tendency. For starters, Jonathan would have more time to master his craft on Hamon, along with Dyer as well, and Will, and also Straitso, because with Dyer being around and Will, Straitso would have no reason to put the Stone Mask on himself and to become a vampire. With his friends being around, they would talk him out of it, and Straitso would likely go to them and try to ask for help with them. So he never turns evil in this timeline, in my opinion. So by that point, nothing much would really change. I think George II could try to run to stop the Nazis on his own. This leads to him being captured along with other people getting captured, and then Jonathan having to probably be the one to go in to meet Joseph and to inform him about everything going on. After this point, there would be no Straitso fight, so Joseph never has that fight. And when it comes to the Santana fight, with more characters around, I think Santana can be dealt with much easier. But then again, I don't think their Hamon is advanced enough to fight Pillarman yet. So Santana is much stronger than most of them are here. When it comes to the rest of Battle Tendency, we would get the meeting with Caesar, but there would also be Will, Mario, and Caesar's siblings, in my opinion. After that point, I don't really think much would change. I just think there would be a lot. I think Speedwagon would likely lead the story earlier in this timeline, so he wouldn't be involved in this version of the Pillarman fight, and we would just get the cast here. So Jonathan, George, Straitso, Dyer, Will, Mario, and Caesar's 4 siblings. They're all going to be here with Joseph and Caesar in this timeline, with Speedwagon excluded. This fight would more or less probably go the same, but probably potentially kill a Pillarman off earlier, or alternatively, they may actually just do a lot better due to there being much more characters to actually go against the Pillarman. Overall, I don't think much would change in this timeline. Joseph still gets the rings put onto him, and that whole thing goes the same, and obviously the meeting with Lisa happens, like it canonically does. After this point, there's not much I could really say that would really change, except there would just be extra helpers in this timeline. So by this point, nothing much would realistically change. We still get the training, and we obviously get Joseph versus AC/DC. I don't think much would change as a whole. I still think Joseph's going to defeat AC/DC. They could prevent the brain thing, assuming there's maybe more people with Joseph in this timeline. Maybe Loggins is still alive if there's backup there. And I don't really think Part 2 would really change a little bit afterwards. Obviously, they go to Switzerland where they meet Stroheim, and that whole thing goes the same. And when it comes to the Zappellis, I think Caesar's brothers would charge in to fight Wamu in the spot of Caesar, since I think Caesar's brothers' motives would be different from Caesar's motives, who wanted revenge. In the case of Caesar's brothers, they're just doing it out of spite because their father and a brother abandoned them. So I think they both would have huge hatred over their father and brother, kind of like how Caesar had that hatred over them, had his hatred over Mario. But Caesar's brothers would probably just do it more or less out of spite rather than honor. So yeah, but I think Will would sacrifice himself to save them, and Mario, Caesar, and Caesar's siblings would all work together to kill Wamu, with Will giving all his hormones to them. Afterwards would be nothing much really changing. Well, minus from the fact that Wamu dies earlier, so we're gonna skip out on the chariot fight with Joseph and Wamu. Afterwards would be the final fight with Cars. And I don't really think much would honestly change here. I still think everything with Joseph versus Cars goes the same. Cars becomes the ultimate life form. Joseph has his whole thing with Cars. Everything goes the same, and Joseph still dies, and then obviously fakes his death, because he's still alive. That is more or less going the same, and nothing would really change. The only big change is that there's more characters here, and that Caesar's death would be prevented, and that's the only real changes I can think of for battle tendency that are really major or important. Alright, so now we go to Stardust Crusaders, Part 3. Now, one thing I would also consider a change is that Stroheim would live in this timeline, since I feel like Caesar and his brothers can be in World War II to help them out. So, they would actually be part of the story here. Now, when it comes to it, obviously, an included fact is that Caesar would have Gaius, his son, and he would die to Dio, but would stab himself with the arrow. So he has the son Julius and Rose, so he has his grandkids Julius and Rose, and obviously Stroheim has his son Dominic and daughter Nico, who are both in their 20s. Stroheim's in his 60s by this point. One change is that there would be no Dio, so who's the new main villain? Well, since I'm pretty sure something that has to do with stands is going to be a big role in the story, and I do think that the Joestars will gain stands, like let's say Jonathan finds an arrow and stabs himself with it. Maybe he gets an encounter with Inya and steals one. I mean, maybe not steals one, but maybe buys an arrow off Inya. That's one idea that I think could be cool, or I think could work. Another thing that would honestly change in this hypothetical timeline is that we need a new main villain. And I would have to say the person who discovered the arrows would have to be that villain. And the person who got the arrows from Inya was Diavolo, who was the main villain of Part 5. So, realistically, I'm pretty sure we're just going to say Diavolo. We'll slot him in as the main villain. And realistically, this works as the most logical choice, as Passione was starting to slowly get up on the top of the food chain. Granted, it took a little bit longer beforehand, so Passione isn't as established as it would canonically be, but I think maybe the death of Caesar's son Gaius could be the thing that starts the Passione investigation and why they're looking into it. Caesar could probably be looking into it for a little while. Gaius' death and disappearance all having to do with Diavolo, which I feel like is going to be the scenario we'll go with here. And obviously Diavolo has his goons and henchmen, and we'll say Inya is one of the people who's helping him. I do think Diavolo would have more people in this timeline. He would still have someone like Chocolate and Secco, since they're both in their mid-30s, early to mid-30s during the events of Part 5, so they would be in their early to mid-20s during the events of Part 3, so they can be in the story in this timeline. I don't know about the other elite guards. La Squadra, probably not. Risotto was canonically 15 during the events of Part 3, as he was around the same age as Jotaro, would have been during Part 5, a bit younger, as Jotaro was 29, or Jotaro was 30 during Part 5, and Risotto was 27, so by that logic, Risotto would probably be around 15 to 14, so around the same time he would have started his assassination journey, so he could have been a part of Passione, or could have just been a newbie on Passione, maybe. So maybe Risotto would have been a villain in this timeline. Pulpo could be part of this timeline for sure. Anyone associated with Inya is obviously going to be here, so Inya herself, Whole Horse, and J-Guile are like the three main ones that pop up in my head. So overall, there would be some new villains, or some different ones, but the main villains from like 3 and 5 that I see being involved are Inya, Diavolo is the main villain. Inya is like a servant of some sort. Then we have J-Guile because of her being Inya's son. Whole Horse because he's friends with J-Guile. Excuse me. Just burp there. We have Inya, who's serving Diavolo. Diavolo, who's the main villain. J-Guile is Inya's son. Whole Horse, who's friends with J-Guile, so he's there with him. Chocolate and Secco as two servants of Diavolo, who's part of Passione. Pulpo as someone who's trusted with the arrow and is giving people stands. And then maybe Risotto as a young prodigy assassin that Diavolo recruited. Those are like the 8 villains I can think of at the top of my head who would be involved in this part. Overall, I don't really have any ideas on how these characters would deal with them. Obviously, we know how Whole Horse, J-Guile, and Inya would go against the Crusaders, and plus with all these extra Crusaders, all being part of the story, like Jonathan, George, Julius, Rose, Dominic, Nico, Caesar, Stroheim, Mario, Will, probably not Will, Will's already dead. Same with Dyer and probably Straitzo. Just all these characters from like previous parts that are somehow here. Well, actually, now that I think about it, Straightso might be here if Jonathan's here. Straightso could be here, since Jonathan and Straightso are around the same age. We don't know anything about Dyer's age, so I don't really know whether we should put him in or not. And Will just seems way too old. He'd be 150, and I don't think he would realistically live that long to be in Stardust Crusaders. But yeah, when it comes down to it, the only 8 villains here are obviously those characters, and that's kind of all I can think of there. Um, when it comes down to how I think the story would go, I don't really have any idea. If we're just pairing up all the characters or all my established OCs and canon Crusaders against some Part 5 villains, against Pulpo, I'm pretty sure all the Hormone users would do the best due to Black Sabbath's weakness against light. Minus from that, I think the Hormone users and Avdol would probably do the best in this kind of fight due to their lighting abilities. When it comes to Risotto, this fight is interesting, but I think a lot of the long-range characters like Kakyoin and Rose or Avdol would probably do the best here, especially Avdol since he can canonically track people down with his fire. Iggy would also do a good job here as well. Joseph and Hermit Purple, Caesar and his bubbles can do pretty well. Hard to say about everyone else, but I think the long-range fighters do the best when it comes to Risotto and his invisible abilities. When it comes to Chocolate and Secco, against Chocolate, I do feel like a lot of the long-range fighters could snipe him down in the helicopter if they play their cards right. Or alternatively, it's possible if they get close enough that they could just beat Chocolate down. Secco would be a tough one, but I do think with Jotaro and Star Paladin just being so strong and fast, along with Silver Chariot, I generally just don't think Secco stands much of a chance against them. While I do think all 4 of these villains aren't pushovers per se, and while I do think they could hold up a challenge against some of the Crusaders, especially if it's Crusaders who they have a clear advantage over, I still don't think any of these villains really stand a chance against the Stardust Crusaders. Now, when it comes to Diavolo himself, he's definitely the main target and is definitely the strongest one here. So it's going to be very difficult to go against someone like Diavolo. I do think there's a chance of defeating Diavolo. It is a slim one, granted, but I think there's a possibility of Diavolo being defeated in this timeline. This would be a really hard scenario to go with, and I do think they could beat him, but I think there's some pros and cons with Diavolo. A big pro with Diavolo is that he's not as arrogant as Dio is, so he is definitely someone who's going to be more analytical when it comes down to this fight. That's a huge con for the Crusaders and a huge pro for Diavolo in this fight. He is a lot more self-conscious, he plans out his moves a lot better, and he's never arrogant or cocky in most case scenarios. Now, a big con for Diavolo, or a big pro for the Stardust Crusaders, is the fact that Diavolo doesn't have vampiric powers, or indestructibility, or immortality that Dio has. So, Diavolo, and not only that, but Diavolo himself is not that durable as a whole. Granted, he has tanked some hits in the past, but he's nowhere near on the tier of really any of the Crusaders in durability, let alone on the tier of Part 3 Dio. Not even Part 1 Dio, in fact. So, yeah, if anything with Diavolo, he's not going to do the best here in this kind of situation in a fight, and if he tanks a hit from like a Star Platinum, he's dead meat. He's not going to be tanking that. So I do think the Crusaders would win. Now, would Diavolo kill some Emberts? Of course, the Diavolo is like a top tier fighter. I mean, for crying out loud, you seen what he did to Polnareff. He literally crippled him. Realistically, in one-on-one fights, I feel like Diavolo can take everyone on in a one-on-one fight, with the only exception possibly being Jotaro if he has time stop, but that's a maybe. Everyone else here, I generally think in a one-on-one fight, Diavolo would slam. Like, maybe you could argue like some of the long-range fighters, if they play their cards right, could. Or if Polnareff is like if Polnareff can do his blood dropping method, like how he did in the final fight against Diavolo in the cannon. But no one here could realistically go against Diavolo in a fight, in my opinion. So realistically, one-on-one wise, if Diavolo does that, he would win. But if he's got to deal with all of them in a fight together and they all have to work together, which is most likely what's going to happen, kind of like what actually happened in Stardust Crusaders, and what happens in a lot of final fights in JoJo as a whole, I don't think Diavolo is going to be making it out. I do think he could kill some members though. Quick time erasure attacks that he attacks from behind when they're not noticing, like how he did with Abakio and Narazia. If he can do that, I feel like Diavolo stands a really good chance at this timeline. But overall, I generally don't think he's going to be doing that. I do think he could pull off a few quick kills on some of the weaker members. If we're going through each character here, Jonathan, I'm going to go through each character who'd be part of this timeline. Jonathan seems like an easy kill. Way too old. He's the oldest member. He'd be the oldest member of the team. Him and Straitso, for that matter. If we're throwing Straitso here, I feel like Straitso would be the easiest for someone like Divolo to kill or to give an Abakio Narantia style death to. So, off the bat, those two are like the automatic first two deaths I can imagine in this timeline. Anyone else from like Phantom Blood who's somehow still kicking, they're just as automatically easy of a death for Diavolo. So any of those characters are going to die in this timeline. Georgia II is another character who's likely an easy death for Diavolo, but a very unlikely one, since I feel like he would probably aim for Jonathan. Joseph with his Hanwon training would be a lot harder, so I doubt he would be an easy target. Mario Zeppeli is someone who probably could be an easy target, as he is likely much older than Georgia II. Probably around Jonathan and Straitso's age, probably a bit younger though. I'd say he's near their age, but just younger, so he is probably easier to kill than. So he'd be pretty easy to kill, I would assume, or easier than someone like George. Caesar would also be pretty easy to kill, but I don't really know how easy. I think Caesar and Joseph would both be difficult. His siblings generally just depend on their stands. I never really put much thought into Caesar's sibling stands, so can't say for them. Stroheim would not be an easy kill. The dude's a literal robot, so he can't be a good, quick, easy kill, so I'm pretty sure he's surviving. For throwing Machina and Longins in, those two are going to probably die. I don't think they die to Diavolo. Probably dies to, like, Risotto or Chocolate or Secco. That's probably where to kill those two off, in my opinion. If we're throwing Lisa, then this... Oh, we went through Lisa because, you know, the boat stuff and the events of Phantom Blood never happened, so, yeah, she skipped. When it comes to, the rest of the, characters from, like, Part 3, Jotaro, he would not be easy to kill and would obviously survive. Abdul... Maybe? Probably not. I think Abdul would survive. Polnareff, unless he's put into a similar situation as he was in the canon, i.e. he challenges Diavolo on his own, gets himself captured in a situation where he fights Diavolo to the death and gets killed, I'm pretty sure he's going to live in this timeline. Kakyoin's also the same here. His range is really good, and I feel like unless it's a sacrificial thing, kind of like how he did in the canon, I'm pretty sure he's gonna live in this timeline. Iggy's the same here, and I'm pretty sure Iggy would survive, especially since Iggy doesn't really like fighting much. If we're going with the route Whole Horse Turn's good, which I would personally go with that route. So assuming Whole Horse Turn's good in this timeline, I'm pretty sure he'll also live for the same reason. The OCs, Julius, Rose, Dominic, and Nico would live. I would put Julius around Jotaro and Polnareff's tier when it comes to his stand, so he is a fast, strong stand like them, so he should be able to go against Polnareff. Rose being a long-range fighter, I would probably say stands a good chance against if she keeps her distance against Diavolo like Kakyoin or Avdol or Caesar. Nico's a long-range healing stand, so I think she would do really good in hiding off. And Dominic's stand has to mainly do with sound. It is a punchy ghost, but it's not on the tier of a Jotaro, Dominic, or Jotaro, Julius, or Polnareff. It is probably mostly around Avdol's tier and physical stand ability. But I do think he would survive the part, mainly due to the fact that he is a very smart user. So those four would survive the part. But overall, that would be my opinion. The main deaths would be like older characters who Diavolo could get a quick kill off of, and that would be most of Diavolo's kill counts, in my opinion. That would mostly be Stardust Crusaders as a whole. I don't really have much else to say on it. Diavolo would be the main villain, in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure this is how I would imagine Part 3 going in this timeline. moving on to part 4, this would be some very interesting changes, as in this hypothetical timeline, a lot of the first half of part 4's villains would not exist. So the main reason they wouldn't exist is because they were given the arrow, is because they were stabbed by the stand arrow by Keicho, and Keicho got his arrow from his father, who got it from Dio. In this timeline, since Dio obviously isn't here, unless you're going with the route of Diavolo, but even then, I doubt Diavolo would know some random Japanese man, let alone give him information and the arrow for free. So in this case, this leads to them never getting the stand arrow. This also means every character such as Angelo, Keicho, Okuyasu, the Lock Dude, Hazumata, Yukiko, uh, Akira, Rohan, and the Rats all never get their stand in this timeline. All those characters I just named off, they never get a stand in this timeline. Or now the next question is, what happens when it comes to part 4? Obviously, I think one thing is, well, why did you not bring up Koichi? Well, here's the thing with Koichi. The fact that he met the Joestars, and the fact that I feel like Yoshihiro still has his arrow, I'm pretty sure somewhere in the story Koichi would have still been stabbed with the arrow. Maybe Yoshihiro stabs him on accident, or intentionally. But regardless, I still think we're getting Koichi getting echoes. Now, when it comes to characters who got stabbed by the arrow by Yoshihiro, and everyone who had something to do with Yoshihiro's arrows, this character includes the rock, paper, scissors kid, who obviously has nothing to do with the plot, so there's probably nothing for him to really add to the story. Then there's Mikitaka, who would probably play a similar role to Okuyasu as the dumb Jobro, comic relief. Then there's Yuya, who could definitely play Rohan's role as a cocky narcissist who's part of the crew. And then obviously, then there's the July 14th fights. I think it was July 14 or June 14. I don't remember. When it was the fight with the guy inside of the tower, Superfly. Then there was the fight with Enigma, and then there was the fight with Cheap Trick. So those are all the characters who got stabbed by the arrow. And obviously, when it comes to characters who were already stabbed by the arrow, how would their story affect, or what would happen to them? With Angelo, he gets executed, so that's really nothing to talk about with him. Keiichi and Okuyasu are stuck living in a crappy household with their terrible father, so unfortunately for them, they're stuck in a horrible life. The Lock Dude is probably still scamming people, but without a stand. Hazumata's likely just hitting in a room, watching hentai, knowing him. Yukiko is either a normal girl in this timeline because she never gets her stand and falls in love with Koichi, or she's a crazy girl, but she's either attracted to, or she's just attracted to non-stand users. I don't know. After that is Akira. He's probably just doing his own thing. I don't even know what he's doing at that point. Probably just playing guitar and stuff. I don't know. After him would be the Rats, and they're just being rats. They're doing nothing. So that would really be it. One big change is that Josuke's grandfather may never die, but I don't know. I think he'd still die. They'd probably find a new way to kill him off. Like, let's say Kira kills him or something. Tonio's still in the story, so obviously he's going to be around, and you could do his Tonio arc. And also another change that Polnareff would actually be in Morio in this timeline because Diavolo was already taken out much earlier. So if anything, all the Crusader, or every remaining character from parts 1, 2, and 3 that are still alive, obviously characters from 3 and 2 mostly, they would actually show up in part 4 in this timeline. So all those characters are going to be in part 4. So we do actually get to see Polnareff in part 4, which would actually be really cool to see. We get Caesar in part 4, we get siblings, we get Mario Zeppeli in part 4. We get all these characters who get to show up in part 4. Now, when it comes to part 4 in this timeline, I do think there would probably be some characters getting killed off. Now, when it comes to Shigechi, we don't really know much about his character and getting stabbed. I don't know much about when it comes to how he got a stand and all that. Someone correct me in the comments if he got stabbed by Keicho or Akira or something, or maybe he just awoke when he was born with a stand or something. I don't know. I don't think they ever really went into detail with him. When it comes to Shigechi, I'm pretty sure his story will just go the same. He'll meet Kira and get killed and give them the button. But if it's not him, then I could see maybe Caesar doing it, or maybe Koichi. I mean, not Koichi, but Iggy, or one of Caesar's siblings, or Mario Zeppeli. I think someone else could end up playing that role of giving the final button away, and that's probably how I think the story would go. I don't think much would honestly change when it comes to the rest of the story. It would generally be a different story for sure. I would have to I really need to kind of find a way to write this version of Part 4, because this one would be a really tough one to write around with. But I think there would definitely be this would definitely be a different story for sure. Um, if we're skipping all the way to the final fight of this timeline, obviously we got Mikitaka and Yuya around to play the role of this fight. Um, no Heaven's Door Rohan is going to be difficult, so I guess someone else would just have to be the one who discovers Kira as Hayato and just gets blown up to bite the dust in Rohan style. If I had to say which character fits that role the best, this one's tough, but maybe Kakyoin? I mean, he's a very smart guy. I think Kakyoin could theoretically do it. Alternatively, you could just give Caesar's siblings a Rohan Heaven's Door-like ability and have one of them reveal it and then die to bites the dust in a similar style to Rohan. Dominic can maybe use his sound stand to to find a way to have Hayato reveal it, and then Dominic can be the one who takes the bite the dust explosion in Rohan's place. I think I'd probably just go with Dominic. We'll say Stroheim's son Dominic is the one who figures it out. He gets killed by Bite the Dust, but his death isn't a permanent one. It's very similar to someone like Rohan. But I could maybe see someone being killed off permanently by Bite the Dust, like maybe Mario or Stroheim or something. I don't know. George I would have die in this timeline. Him dying to Kira could be a good sacrifice, and this can motivate Josuke to finally kill Kira in this timeline. So Jotaro doesn't kill him in this timeline. Or, I mean, technically it wasn't Jotaro, it was an ambulance, but that's probably how I would have Part 4 go. When it comes to Part 5, nothing happens. This part just gets skipped, because there's no Diavolo, Giorno doesn't exist. Italy is probably in a different state, in a much better state, granted. When it comes to what every character would be doing, Trish is probably taken care of by the Speedwagon Foundation, so she's likely being taken care of, and they're probably taking care of her. She might have a new family. Maybe she's being I guess see her being taken in by Kakyoin and Rose, who would be a couple by this point and have their own family of stand users. So I could see Rose and Kakyoin actually taking her in and helping her out. So that would be one scenario that could come out of it. When it comes down to how the rest of the cast would do, Bruno would probably just be doing his own thing. If the Speedwagon Foundation had its own base in Italy, or in this case, Zeppeli Inc. would be the one probably taking in Pasione's place, I could see Bruno definitely finding some kind of role in that place. So I think Bruno would just play a role and help out with Zeppeli Inc. He could end up discovering Fugo like he originally did, and that leads to Fugo also still discovering Narantia, and Bruno discovering Abakio, and then Bruno discovering Mista. So maybe all those characters just work for Zeppeli Inc. instead. Frito's probably doing his own thing, probably scamming people and just living on the streets, if you want to include my OC in this scenario, which we'll say he is. And he's probably just doing his own thing. Unless someone eventually catches him and then he joins Zeppeli Inc., I don't think much would honestly change when it comes to Part 5, so I don't really have anything to add into it. When it comes to what La Squadra does, I'm pretty sure by this point it's hard to really say where Risotto is right now. I don't really have a story idea for Risotto when it comes to Part 5, so I don't really know where to kind of fit him into this storyline. I don't really have much of a storyline for Risotto, so yeah. The rest of the squadron as a whole, I don't really know either. Risotto could still be alive, or he could have been killed off in Stardust Crusaders. If you're wondering, I don't know if I would put him in Part 3, but I would put him in Part 6 as a John Gallier replacement, I'll go into that later on what's going to happen in Part 6, because that one's going to be pretty big when it comes to its changes. When it comes to the rest of the Squadra, they likely are not involved in the story in this timeline. unless Risotto still discovers those characters. But then again, we don't really know any of the origin stories of anyone from La Squadra, so we can't really say what these characters were like before they joined Passione and what they were like and what their storylines were beforehand and what caused them to be where they're at. So overall, I can't really say where all these characters would end up being. So we don't really know where Formaggio, Ghiaccia, Malone, Prosciutto, Pesci, Illusio, and Sobet and Gelato. I don't know where all these characters would end up being at in this timeline or what their lives would look like in this hypothetical because we don't really know much about them. We don't know about why they joined Passione, what caused Risotto to want them to be part of his crew, and we don't really know how that would really lead to that storyline. So, unfortunately, we don't really know what we can say and what they're up to in this hypothetical. Whatever happens, I don't really think it would matter. You can make up your own headcanons on that in the comments. When it comes to the rest of the elite guards, I don't really know about the Clash and Talking Head guys. We don't really know much about them, but I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be in part 3 since they both seem like they were in their early 20s or something. Karna, we don't really know much about him either, so yeah, I'm pretty sure he's not in this timeline. And then when it comes to Chocolate and Secco, as I stated earlier, I feel like they would have been part of the part 3 timeline, so I feel like they would have already been killed off by the Crusaders, as they were pretty evil. And knowing the Stardust Crusaders, I'm pretty sure they would be okay with killing off 2 pure evil pieces of crap like Chocolate and Secco. Overall, that would be where part 5 is. A much different story. There would not even really be a story at all. Everyone would just be doing their own thing. I guess I should add Likia Luca for anyone interested in knowing what's up to him. I'm pretty sure he's just the land shark still. He's probably doing his own thing, I don't know. But yeah, that's all of part 5, and I don't really have anything else to say about it except that this story just doesn't even happen at all. Now, when it comes to part 6, Stone Ocean, this would also be a big change. Because in this timeline, we never get Pucci. I mean, Pucci still exists, but he's never going to be in the storyline because in this hypothetical timeline, Dio already died, like, over a century ago. So, no Dio to Bry Pucci. You could say it's Diavolo, but I'm pretty sure Diavolo would not want nothing to do with Pucci. And even if Pucci and Diavolo met, I'm pretty sure Diavolo would have just killed him for finding out about his identity. And not only that, but Diavolo does not know about the Heaven Plan, so he realistically wouldn't really have any interest in someone like Pucci, and would also not really see Pucci as a successor to him. I don't even think Diavolo ever even had a Passione successor planned out for him. But when it comes to Diavolo, one thing I would say when it comes down to the events of part 6 in this hypothetical timeline is that I could see it being an ex-Passione member who was put in a Pucci-like situation. So this is assuming we still get a Stone Ocean, which I'm going to say we do. As we still have Jolene, obviously, and we still have the prison, and we still have some characters we can still use. But however, I do think there'd be changes. So we would get a new main villain. Don't really have a stand idea for him or her yet. Don't really have a character in mind yet. But they will end up playing the role of the person who gets Jolene arrested. And Risotto would probably just be the new John Gallier, which is the scenario I would go with. And Risotto would end up being knocked out, but I would have him stay alive and have him join the team and redeem himself, because I like Risotto. When it comes to the rest of Part 6 as a whole, obviously, when it comes to the whole story, Tenmei, Taijana, Sophia, and Michael, I'm keeping them as part of the story. Jolene is obviously still in the prison. Something will happen to Jotaro that would cause him, that would have to, honestly, there would have to really be a storyline on why Jotaro is being attacked the way he is, because obviously the Heaven story is kind of cut out. My idea is maybe Requiem? I don't know. I think maybe the person is interested in taking the arrows in, and there can be some kind of storyline of trying to use a stand arrow to boost up themselves, and trying to find maybe some kind of new evolution for stands. That could be their motivation, and stealing Jotaro's arrow is kind of the main thing, and killing him. Jotaro isn't killed in the Risotto fight, but we'll say he gets knocked out to a point where he gets put into a coma, like how he was in the Canon Stone Ocean. His coma wouldn't be as bad, granted, but it takes him out for a while. He's put into a vegetable state for at least a couple of weeks. That's probably how I'm writing around it. Now, when it comes to the storyline, Josuke and Koichi would obviously be with Tenmei, Taijana, Sophia, and Michael, so they're joining the team. And also, when it comes to the main Stone Ocean team, it's actually going to be a lot more different in this timeline. So, in this timeline, Emporio would have his mom around, because Emporio's mom was killed by Pucci. We don't really know what Emporio's mom's stand was canonically about. All we know is that Pucci's seen her as a threat, stole her stand, and killed her. Maybe it was burning down the house, which I think it is, but I don't really know. But Emporio's mom would be part of the team. When it comes to other Stone Ocean characters, Hermes is still part of the team, mainly due to the fact that the whole storyline with her had to do with Sports Max and really had no connection with Pucci. That's why she was in the prison, so she's still in the story. Foo Fighters would not exist in this timeline since there's no stand disc, so unfortunately Pucci doesn't accidentally throw a disc into a water and the plankton doesn't fuse into it, creating a stand which is Foo Fighters, so they don't exist in this timeline. Weather Report is not in the story in this hypothetical since Pucci... granted, the brothers thing still happens, and I'm pretty sure Weather Report and Pucci's drama still happens with the whole clan and stuff. Weather Report would likely have unfortunately died in this hypothetical, as he would end up dying from strangulation after being hung. His sister Perla still dies, and Pucci would be left with guilt and would likely be depressed. Honestly, now I think about it, I think you could theoretically include Pucci in this storyline, actually. Okay, I'll go into him later, but okay. But my idea now, I just realized that you can keep Pucci in the storyline, but as like a redeemed mentor. That actually could be a cool idea. Okay, I'll explore it later. Okay, so we obviously still imply that Emporio's in the group, Hermes is still in the group, FF and Weather aren't in the group. Anasui would still be part of the group. Like with Hermes, his character had nothing to do with Pucci. The reason he's in prison was mainly due to the fact that he murdered his previous girlfriend for cheating on him. So in this timeline, Anasui would still be part of Stone Ocean's team, so nothing really changes there, and he's still part of the crew, like how he canonically was. So we still have Hermes, Emporio, and Anasui in the team. Unfortunately, no FF and Weather Report. Pucci can be... Now, when it comes to my idea with Pucci, because this just popped in my head, and I was like, that actually could work. Have Pucci's storyline be a redemption arc where Pucci has to redeem himself for the death of his brother and sister. Pucci believed he was doing a right thing by trying to get an investigator to stop Weather and Perla, but however, the investigator was a member of the KKK. That led to both of them being attacked, Weather getting killed, and due to the fact that Weather Report never awakens his stand in this timeline, because Pucci never gets stabbed by the arrow because there's no Dio, this leads to Weather Report also dying because he gets choked to death, because Pucci wouldn't check on him. Pucci would never have the time to check on him to see if he's alive, so Weather Report would have ended up being killed by the strangulation and the murder from the clan, and Perla still would have taken her own life, so it obviously leaves Pucci as the sole survivor of his siblings and would give him his own kind of depression arc where he needs to learn to become a better person. Also, I think Trish can be in the story, assuming we go the route with her Crusader adopting her. So now that I think about it, you could add Trish in this timeline, and I think she could eventually develop Spice Girls, as she canonically did. She started developing it when she was a teenager, so I'm pretty sure having a family of stand users, like having Kakyoin, Rose, and Tenmei around in her life, could have caused her to eventually develop a stand like Spice Girls. I think she either would have been adopted by Julius and Nico or Taijana, so she can be like an older sister to Taijana, or she can be adopted by Kakyoin and Rose and be an older sister to Tenmei. I think she'd probably just be adopted by Julius and Nico, since they're both from like Europe. So it would make Trish more comfortable to live in a family that would be more Italian based, rather than moving her to Japan. Though it would probably be easier to move her to Japan since she would be around Josuke's age. So she would probably have someone who can help her out, but I'm pretty sure it'd be a lot smarter to just keep her around the European region. So obviously keep her around with like Julius and Nico, which I'm probably going to go that route. So we'll just say those two adopt Trish in this timeline, which would make a lot of sense, and that would kind of just be where I think the team would look like. And now, since I don't really have any clues for Part 6, I can't really say how the story would go, but maybe the universe doesn't reset? We're writing a new main villain here, different motivations and all, so this new main villain likely has some kind of new reason to do what they're doing. I'm still thinking Part 6 happens. I mean, I still think Stone Ocean's gonna happen, but I don't really know how it would happen. I know you can just replace Pucci with a new villain. Pucci plays the role of a depressed mentor who got his siblings killed a long time ago and now wants to rewrite those wrongs and wants to redeem himself. I don't know how you can write a Pucci redemption arc, but honestly, I think that would be a really cool idea. Overall, I think that's my idea for Stone Ocean in this timeline. I don't really have a full blown idea on who I would have live and die. I don't really have a main villain fleshed out. If you guys have any ideas in the comments for like a lot of the story, especially for like parts 4 and 6, since those are like the main ones I feel like I'm struggling on, let me know in the comments. 1, 2, and 3 I got my ideas for already. 5 is just skipped as a whole. There's really nothing I could talk about there. So it looks like part 4 and 6 are like the main ones I'm kind of interested in. Josuke and Koichi would be part of the story. No Okuyasu and Rohan though. Yuya and Mikitaka might be there. I'm doubting they would be there in my opinion, but I think it'd just be Koichi and Josuke. But overall, that's my opinion. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, especially you, Venom 9000. This video was definitely an interesting one to write. If if the timeline you were talking about was Jonathan killing Dio in their last mansion fight, aka the fight where Dio lost his entire body and only had his head left. If that's the storyline you were talking about, I apologize for not going that route, but I kind of wanted to go a different route. If anyone's interested, I can go a route where where that happens. So it would definitely change a lot more if Jonathan had killed Dio in the castle, because now at that point both Will and Dyer are out of the equation. But I can go that route another time. That can be another video for another day. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.